Good evening, everyone. My name is Charles Davis, and I have the honor of, how would you say it, hosting this evening and hopefully directing into the right places. We're talking here with the Ethos Town Hall webinar. Welcome back to those who have participated before. For all those who are here for the first time, welcome. These are very valuable opportunities for all of us to get together, talk about things that are pertinent in all of our lives, what's going on in the world. The Ethos Village, as you might know, comes from an old African saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And Michael Davis, founder, director of all of this, glad to have him here today. He is here on our panel. Coach Jay Hayes, also here on our panel. Tim Brown, our Hall of Famer, on the panel. Everson Walls, who should be a Hall of Famer and is a Black College Football Hall of Famer, is on our panel. And our key panel member tonight, our most distinguished guest, and the person who's going to educate us the most tonight, Ms. Rashida Liberty. She's here, and she's a recognized corporate leader with over 29 years of experience delivering results for, now make sure you listen to this now, Fortune 100 companies. So in other words, she plays with people's money. So you better listen to her because she might help you with yours. Currently, she serves as a senior recruitment leader for Amazon, where she made history as the first woman of color hired as a senior finance leader in worldwide ops, where she provided strategic guidance for 600 leaders, 12,000 associates before becoming the talent attraction business partner for Amazon's senior vice president and CFO. To me, that says seat of power. Love that. And thank you, Ms. Liberty, for being here. I could go on and on. Born in Baltimore, Maryland, raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Marquette University Eagle. Majored in accounting, graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree, continued her studies at Marquette University Law School and earned an MBA, and furthered her training for business leadership at both London Business School and Alpine University in Kitzbühel, Austria, via McKinsey Consultants. Ms. Liberty, I'm going to have to stop there because I could keep going and we'd be out of time for the webinar. But it's easy to say that your bona fides are securely established. And I want to open it up for you to start us tonight because our subject on the table is very simply called trusting the process. Can you get us going with what trusting the process means to you? And then we'll get around to the rest of the panelists and we'll get going here. And I know we'll have questions from our wonderful audience as well. Thank you, Ms. Liberty. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for having me this evening. It's just kind of ironic how I connected to this through a former Amazon colleague who also knew that I became a certified NFL agent over about 2 weeks ago. So very green in the process. I won't say green in transferable skills because when I think of trust the process, you mentioned law school, you mentioned MBA, you mentioned Fortune 100 companies, and being born and bred and groomed primarily by white males and Fortune 100 companies and understanding how to build brands, this was a natural journey. So when I think about trusting the process, that's trusting the process, is building those transferable skills. Sometimes get knocked around a little bit, but taking those lessons and getting back up and realizing that denial in some cases is not delay in your dreams. So have a wonderful story. Would love to share more, but I'll definitely turn it over to the rest of the panel to weigh in on their overall view for trust the process.
All right, great. We'll be back to you very quickly, I know. And thank you, Ms. Liberty, and congratulations on becoming an agent. We need more people like you in the business for these young people who are coming in. And Michael Davis, I'm going to you next, but what she just said about becoming an agent, that's not an invitation for you to get back in shape and try out again, okay? she's just letting people know that she's in the process now, and she's going to be guiding these youngsters trying to make it. Michael Davis, you're the founder, you're the creator. You're the one who handles this day to day with Ethos Village. How about you in trusting the process?
Yeah, you don't have to worry about me trying out for anything as far as football or anything of that nature, for sure. My body reminds me that every day when I wake up. So, but yeah, trusting the process is really just having faith. I think it starts with faith, understanding that the journey is not going to be easy. It's going to be rocky. You're going to fail. You have to know that. And I think a lot of people, especially Generation Z or X, however you want to call it, instant gratification. I want it right now. I don't have to work too hard to get what I want. But I think you have to understand that you're going to have failure. You're going to learn a lot about failure, i.e. winning, through your failures. I think that's the biggest goal. Understand that's going to be beautiful on the other side of failure when it's all said and done. But you gotta learn from these opportunities that people say losses, but they're opportunities for greatness. And I think that's trust in the process. That again, you just don't stop too quick because it hurts or it doesn't feel good. And trusting in that space that you're on the right journey and you have the right people around you.
Fantastic. Mr. Everson Walls, will you follow, please?
Yeah, when you start thinking about trusting the process, I think it mainly means you have to trust yourself. You have to believe in yourself and what you're doing. Hopefully whatever you're doing and wherever you're going, it comes from a good place. And if that's the case, then, wherever you're trying to go, hopefully you've already required or relied on the tools that all of you spoke of. You're relying on those as you go forward. And as you go forward, you have to trust yourself, because there are times when you step out there, you can have all the tools you want. But if you don't believe in yourself, then it doesn't do any good. So you have to make sure that you have yourself together. You have to make sure that you have self-awareness, self-assuredness. Those are the kind of things that really can help you finish the process. And that's what I like. I want to trust the process, and I want to finish the process.
Coach Jay Hayes, I know you've been a defensive line coach for a lot of your career. Get up on that line of scrimmage and show us a little get off with your trust process.
Sure. Well, right now I'm in the process, as you say, working at the NFL Alumni Academy at the Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, training guys to get back into the NFL. We had a young man today that had been cut by a few teams and played a couple different leagues over the last few years. Got signed by the Green Bay Packers and had been here working with us for the last 2 weeks. Aaron Adedejo, he was able, and he's a guy that was a basketball player, never played college football, and decided, well, maybe I don't have a jumper, but I have length, I have athletic ability, and just as a great young man, was able to be around him for the last couple of weeks. And fortunately, he got the call, went up to Green Bay, and they signed him. So he's on practice squad now, and, with the opportunity. And as we all know, we're all on a journey. And it's not always smooth. Not all of us can be first round draft picks and go on to Hall of Fame careers like my friend Tim. But, he had a process that he had to trust as well. And there were times when he was a young player at Notre Dame that, he thought about, well, maybe this wasn't for me. And we've all been there. So it's great to see these guys that I'm working with now on the back end of my career, not coaching daily in the NFL, but having an opportunity to help someone else get to their dream. So that's the process. And Michael talked about it, where, you don't lose, you learn. And as long as you do that, you have a chance, and that's what we're trying to get across to these young men.
Tim Brown, as you get ready to tell us about the process from your perspective, I just have one question before we start. Did King Joffrey Jaffer leave you his chair instead of Prince Akeem? I'm just wondering if maybe, because that is the baddest chair I've seen in my life. And
hey man, look,
get an invitation to the house so I can view it, because I know I won't get to sit in it.
Hey, no, there's actually another one over here. So I have a visitor king chair too. So my wife said, you want to be a king, you could be a king in that room and that room only.
I like it.
The rest of the house she runs. So
I love it.
So when I want to feel good about myself, I come in here. But hey, I see this a little different, guys, because you have to have a process. Right? Otherwise, it's trial and error. I think in my life, when I look at how I got to where I am, until I got the right coaches in place, I didn't know what the process was. So we were doing trial and error before then. And then once we got a process, now, okay, this is how we do this. This is how and now we can trust the process. But I really think you got to have a good mentor in place. You have to have a good leader in place. You have to have somebody to show you what the process is. Because otherwise, you're just going to be bumping your head here, bump your head there, going back and forth because you don't know what the process is. But once you get a process, now you got to trust that. Now you got to understand, we didn't become a good football team until we have a coach who showed us, look at what you're doing on film. Tim, if you'd have been here instead of being there, we'd have completed the pass and we would have won the game. You know what I mean? But before, the coaches didn't know and I didn't know. So we were just bumping our heads around. So I think it's really important, man, to have somebody that you can lean on, somebody who you can say, hey, bro, am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? And let them direct you until you figure out what the process really is.
Thank you so much from all of you. And Ms. Liberty, having heard all of your colleagues there and teammates, so to speak, and of course you with your own definition, or at least a starting point for it, because I have a feeling that trusting the process can be a little bit on the fluid side, right, and elastic, depending on what we're doing. We're coming out of the athletics world, right? We're coming out of the sports world, and let's face it, if you follow football, somehow you hear trust the process, and you hear Nick Saban in Alabama, and that process is working awfully well for them, but we don't know exactly what he means by his process. So positives of that phrase, negatives of that phrase, how do you see it, and how do you see people being able to find their own process and put it into play?
Yeah, I love that. I love the conversation and hearing from all of you from that sports aspect. My husband's also a coach, so I've lived with this for the last 15, 20 years as well. And so what I've realized and what I hope to offer, coming from a female perspective, is that a lot of young men don't want to feel vulnerable to even ask those questions on what the process is. So when you say trust the process, sometimes you have a lot of people coming from homes where they didn't actually have that love, support, and sponsorship, endorsement, and mentorship. All they had was the athletic skill. And in some cases, even when they had that skill at a college level, it may have been abused in certain ways, right? Because you're used as an athlete and not necessarily honored for more than that. And so I think there is a piece that we should leave with young people, that you have to be vulnerable and ask the question to show me what that process is. And also be willing and reduce ego, because as men, you're supposed to have all the answers. But unfortunately, you just don't sometimes. And sometimes you feel vulnerable even saying, I don't have all the answers. I can't tell you how many young men have sat in our living room and cried through conversations. They wouldn't do that out on the field. So it's when you say trust the process, sometimes we have to be the adults to realize they may not know what that process is. I think also the good of it is saying, what is your journey? You have to ask those questions. There is still I'll come from a corporate America lens, being the only Black female oftentimes in the room. No one wants to tell you the secrets. No one wants to tell you how to get in. It's only one of us, and that's the only way it's going to be. But my job was to make sure that more Black females made it to that corporate table. The same thing is happening. I'm a Black female in the agency. I think there's a very small handful of us. I mean, single-digit percentage of us that are actually involved as agents. Sometimes you can't go to the other side and say, tell me the game, tell me what you did, help me out. They're not going to do it. So we have to, those who have arrived have to make sure that they share those experiences so others can fill their footsteps, leave a sustainable legacy.
Ms. Liberty, I'm absolutely shocked that you would be in a business where a bunch of men are going to, not help and do things like that. I have to tell you, I'm stunned by what you just said. We'll get back to that later on. Mr. Everson Walls, you heard what she just talked about there, positives, negatives. How about how you see it affecting student athletes, men and women?
Well, to be honest, I never really had a problem with not wanting to say what or ask questions, because I was brought up by a bunch of women, and they didn't play. It's just the way it was. If you've already been embarrassed a lot growing up, if you grew up in a house full of women, so you're immune by the time you get out there to ask questions. That's something that I never had a problem with, because if you want to know something, a sister's gonna tell you this is how you go get it. And so I never had that issue. So that's why I say you always have to trust yourself. Uh, different philosophies I may not agree with. I came up under, it's been well known, four amazing coaches, at least four amazing coaches throughout my entire career. Every system and message was different. So I had to know how I fit within that particular process. Each team, each institution, there was a different process I had to learn. And Tim knows a bit about that. Going from Notre Dame, going to the Raiders, and I think you ended up in Tampa. There was a different message from each different coach. So that process is always going to change. The only change that you can control is yourself. And to me, I've always tried to bank on myself.
Tim, when you hear that, were there any commonalities across the board? Because even with the Raiders, it wasn't just that you were with one organization for most of your career. Multiple head coaches during that time. I'm pretty sure multiple position coaches during that time. Were there any commonalities in terms of finding process, finding ways to increase, get better, all of those other things, and then also deal with the bumps in the road?
Yeah, well, in at the Raiders, bro, you may fire the head coach, but the assistant coaches stay the same. I had Fred Belindikoff for 15 years, and we went through 5 different head coaches. So,
and countless packs of cigarettes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's basically all he needed was, a cigarette break. But, for me, having a guy who had played the game at such a high level, his process was totally different than my process. And we agreed to disagree early on that I was going to do things a little differently. And if they worked, then he wasn't going to say anything about it. But if it didn't work, then we had to talk about it. But thankfully, we didn't have too many conversations, if you know what I mean. So we worked things out pretty good, man. But I learned that from him. I learned, what his process was. I took a lot of what he said, what he did. And then I said, okay, this is my spin on that. And that's what I'm going to do. So, look. Unfortunately for me, the coaches we had early on in my career, were there just to please Al Davis and not to help the team. So from that standpoint, trying to learn the process from somebody like that didn't work, right? Because they didn't even know what the process was. You know what I mean? So it took later in my career when you got a couple coaches in who really wanted to see something happen and teach a proper process that we really started to go to the next level. I was not on my way to a Hall of Fame career going into year 11 in my career. But because I learned a new process, the next 4 years put me in a position to get to a Hall of Fame.
Michael Davis, you have so many youngsters that come through Ethos Village. And Ms. Liberty was talking about some of these youngsters in their living room. Now they can be vulnerable. How do you see it? And what do you see from all of them that come through? Because I know all of them with their vulnerabilities, it probably shows in different ways. It's not always tears. I'm sure there's some anger, frustration, confusion. There is some happiness. You and your staff, you and your people, you see it every day, men and women. Unmute, please. We need you. Mm-hmm. There we go.
Thank you. No, that's a great point. We see it all the time. A lot of kids walk in just not trusting the next person, not trusting the mentor or the coach because of things they've been through. And with that, not trusting, they don't trust the process. They don't trust what it is that you say the process looks like. You may describe, like Tim was saying, here's the process that you need to follow as a mentor. But if I don't trust you, I'm not going to believe in the process that you just defined for me. And so you have to be able to build up confidence and build up a relationship with the kiddos first and foremost, and then be able to walk through, as you see it and kind of compare it to where they've been, right? I mean, there's no wrong answer in going through the process. I think that you can definitely learn from different processes. I learned a lot from Coach Hayes. His process was right on point, but I took different pieces from that process when I went to grad school. And I used some of that process to be able to get to a point where I got my MBA at Northeastern. And I took that process and went to Texas Instruments. So there's a lot of different things that you can pull from different process and different people as you begin to develop a relationship and trusting. So finding that great mentor and being very consistent in that relationship builds up trust, which will allow these kids to begin to understand and believe in the process that you're describing. And then have it described it for themselves. They have the right to understand how it's going to work for them. That's all said and done.
Coach Hayes, what's it look like when that process comes together, when what you're helping outline and define meets what they want and they grasp it and you see them take off? I mean, in a movie, it'd be like, wow, it just happened.
Yeah.
I know it doesn't really happen like that, but what's that like for someone in your position to see it all come together?
Well, I think a lot of what we're talking about, the mentee trusting the mentor and those types of things. One of the things the mentee has to do is be humble, learn to be humble and come to someone and ask them questions and what should I do in this case? And that's hard for a younger person if they don't trust the mentor and they're coming to you, you're new to their life, and trying to direct them and put them on the right road, show them how to do certain things. But they have to be humble enough to say, look, I'm going to listen to this guy because I've had these bumps in the road and it's not working for me, or, I'm not having the success that I'm capable of having. And maybe I need to listen to someone. And, that's the come to Jesus moment that they have to have. And what I try to do with my players, and I, did it with Michael as an athlete that I had 30 some years ago. And, maybe 40, was it close to 40, Mike? No, it's 30, I guess. But I always, and, growing up, my parents, my coaches, my mentors were people of faith. And I try to be a light to my players, the people I work with now as kind of a consulting aspect in their athletic career. And I still, we will pray daily. I'll give them verses, those types of things, because I think that's important. And it's important to me and what I believe. And if I can direct them that way, to beside the fact that have faith in yourself, like Everson said, they need to have a strong faith and belief that is their backbone, so that when they go out, they can just navigate through the world and know that there's a higher power that will help them and steer them and never give them more than they can handle. Because, you're going to have bad things happen no matter what you do. But if you just keep the faith and know in the grand scheme of things, at the end of the day, we all have to be able to know what our real purpose in life is. And that's to get to the prize that God has for us, and the belief we have, that I have, and, it's up to you to have it. But I, just my faith I have in Jesus Christ. And I think that's important.
I'm looking at our chat box here, and I see Shannon Barnes typed in "each one teach one," which I think is one of the popular phrases that are used, but they're so real. Ms. Liberty, I've got to go back to you on this, because Coach Hayes just touched on it. There are going to be times where it doesn't go right. You got the process mapped out. Everything looks wonderful, and some bump, some challenge Sometimes they tell you it's one way, and by the time you get to that finish line, they've moved the finish line. What do you do in that situation when your mentees come to you and say, hey, you told me it was A, B, and C. They threw a D on me. What's going on here? And how do you keep them going? Because many people will want to, they want to bounce out at that point.
Yeah, I think you have to teach the ability to be agile. I think about the young people that I employ in my corporate world and how many times they meet with me and say, how do I get to your level? When, they want promotion immediately, right?
Yeah, like as soon as they walk in the door, yo, what's the secret? And when do I get the corner office? Thursday,
Right.
Friday?
Exactly.
Yeah, like Pookie and Boomerang, right? Or Boney T, sorry, and Boomerang. I've been on time, 8, 9 days, most of the time. When we gonna talk promotion? Sorry, Mr. Liberty.
No, that is absolutely right. And you all have experienced that with teammates, with newbies, rookies who join the team. They want the immediate gratification. And unfortunately, we live in a different time. The Gen Zs and millennials, they're different, and they want elevation quickly rather than gathering the specific tools. So what I do is I try to make sure that their life is a toolkit, and you have to pick up different tools along the way: screwdrivers, hammers, all the wonderful tools in order to be successful. It's not necessarily about ditching the toolkit and saying, I'm now in the C-suite. You have to gather those tools. And so I think it plays out in all different industries. And part of the reason why I pursued NFL agency, it's a long story, but in general, the overall is life, is to say that 3 to 5 year window of your life is something that you've been working on since Little League, right? Since you were 5 years old, 6 years old, playing tackle. That 3 to 5 window, it goes really fast. It's a small little dash in the scope of life. And we don't want you necessarily trying to look for part-time work immediately after leaving the NFL. So you have to think about longevity. And so those tools that you build along the way, those bumps in the road, are going to help you develop those tools that are so necessary for you to have a legacy for your family. We're not just trying to feed mom and pay the bills for 3 to 5 years. We're trying to pay the bills and succeed for the legacy that you're going to build for your great grandchildren. And so that is what we have to teach our young people, that the process is more, those bumps and bruises along the way are necessary for you to develop the skills that you're going to pass on for many, many generations.
Michael Davis, I know you're picking up what she put down there because I'm sure that comes rolling through your office on a daily basis. How do you build that toolkit with these youngsters when they come through? And we keep talking about how different these youngsters are nowadays. Is there still that same work ethic where they will come through and if you give them the right stuff, they'll stick with it? Or is it more of a, boy, we got to do a little extra convincing to stay with it?
A little bit extra convincing to stay with it, I would say. I think with Ethos, we really talk about this legacy plan and going to the core, going to the foundation of identity, purpose, value, and vision. Coach talked about purpose, and I think purpose is really connected to your faith. When you have this strong understanding of who you are, where you want to go, it becomes easier to believe in a process that's going to be in alignment with your foundation. And so we start there with the kiddos, end of the day. So there are different narratives about your legacy, about what you're supposed to do, about your identity, about your purpose, about all these different things. But I think when you can define it for yourself, you start to really believe in these attributes that you start to build up, be it it's value systems, identity, purpose, or commitment, fortitude, perseverance, humility. These things become foundational pillars that allow these kids to grow in the right direction. And so when somebody comes as a mentor and it says, hey, now let's work together to grow this faith, grow this identity, grow this purpose, it becomes an easier path for these kids to stay locked in as opposed to trying to copy something that they see that may disappear with social media. This becomes a grounded piece that I think is, again, foundational driven based on purpose in your belief in God or whatever belief that you have in a higher power. But it goes down to the foundational pieces first. before you can build that out and then trust a process at that point.
Tim Brown, as you were putting your process together, and we just heard Michael Davis talk about legacy and the identity, purpose, value, vision, and goals. Did you commit your process to paper? Did you commit it to a listing that you referred to? Was it just inside your head and your heart? How did you go about putting that all together that you knew? Because, in the beginning, I think I'm this, I think I'm that. But when you found it and it was working, was that something that you did each and every year? Did you refine it? How'd you do it?
Yeah, I once I found what worked for me and what worked during games or whatever, then yeah, I just refined what I was doing. I mean, there was no reason to change what was working as far as I was concerned. I mean, when different things came up, you adjusted a little bit, but for the most part, man, I tried to stay, everybody knew exactly who I was and what I was going to do, but at the same time, they weren't going to be able to stop it, and that's the attitude that I took when I went out there, and it just worked out great, so. But, look, this process thing can be a very, very difficult thing because, in our case, sometimes we don't have time to figure out what that process is. You know what I mean? Because you're a first round pick, you may get, a couple of 3 or 4 years to figure out the process. If you're a free agent, you got about that long to figure out that process, or you're going to be out. You know what I mean? So you got to find a different way to do it. You got to find a different way to make this thing happen for yourself. So, so when you look at a team, there could be literally 50 different processes that are going on out there because of what everybody's dealing with, And I think as a person, you have to say, this works for me. I can't worry about what this brother does, that brother does. I have to do what works for me. And I think the people who can do that, end up doing very well. And it's the same thing in the classroom. You can't worry about what Johnny and Susie are doing. You have to focus on yourself and know what you're capable of doing and what you're not capable of doing. You know what I mean? I wanted nothing to do with statistics class. I wanted nothing, absolutely nothing to do with it. You know what I mean? And I'm a math guy. I love numbers and all that stuff. But that was like, no, I'll bow out. I'm out of this. You know what I mean? Why put yourself in a situation where you're going to fail? You know what you do and you know what you do well. You stick to that.
I love it. Mr. Walls, I've got to come back to you on that because Tim Brown, Heisman Trophy winner, first round draft pick, coming out of Notre Dame, the most iconic school in college football. You coming out of Grambling, one of the more iconic schools in the HBCUs, but you're undrafted, and then you go ahead and take every pass that comes your way your rookie year and intercept it. Okay? Did you have a set of goals that you put in place prior to reporting to the Dallas Cowboys or during your time at Grambling that you committed to? I'm always reminded of Tiger Woods as a kid. He knew how many majors Jack Nicklaus had won and what big tournaments. He had it written down. It was over his bed. Looked at it every day, every night. So people do it different ways. What was yours?
Yeah, I think I always look at football or really life like this. The person that I am, that's pretty much the ball player that I was. That pretty much goes hand in hand as far as I'm concerned. Trying to be thoughtful, trying to be a good teammate, it all correlates with life itself. Trying to be insightful about certain things, trying to anticipate certain things, having ambition, wanting to do better for your community. That's a team. That village is your team. So to me, it all goes hand in hand. And if I might toot my own horn, when it comes to ethos, one thing that we do, and I've noticed, I say we, I look at our counselors and I look at Mike Davis. When they talk to those kids, when I come in there after the work is already done, all the hard work is already done, and I come in, as the celebrity and all that crap, Mike Davis and those counselors have already earned the trust from those kids. And to me, that is such a relief when I step in because the hard work is already done. And so when you start talking about a process, it's not just the kids having to get it. Sometimes you got to reach down there and reach them and touch them. You have to be able to talk to them on their level. And I've never really been in there at the beginning of that process with our counselors, with Ethos. But by the time I'm there, those kids are looking at our counselors in a totally different way in the end of those 6 weeks than at the beginning of those 6 weeks. So that trust doesn't come from the kids, trying to relate to the counselors. That's the counselors really relating to the kids. And let's face it, with this Gen Z you were talking about and this society we're living in now, you're going to have to work, as Mike Davis said, a little bit harder to reach them. It's not like talking to us to where in our generation, somebody tells us what to do. We just say, okay, and then we go do it. Well, nowadays, this generation, they ask questions. And the first one is why, So you have to be able to communicate with these kids. And I think Ethos has done that, but not just Ethos. If you're going to be a good mentor, then it's got to go both ways. And I think that's extremely important.
Well, before I move on, I have to say, Mr. Walls, very savvy veteran move coming in after everybody's done everything else. I think that is one of the number one takeaway is that's what you call a Hall of Fame veteran move right there. Okay. That's why you're you. All right. So I'm going Ms. Liberty and Coach Hayes. I'm going to put this one together with both of you because I think Mr. Tim Brown brought up something very important. You got to find what works for you. But sometimes you're in positions where what works for you is going to be difficult to put into action in a corporation, in a group setting, and all those things. How do you find that proper path that works for you, yet also understanding how the room works? Ms. Liberty, if you start with that, Coach Hayes, I want you to finish with it, please.
I think understanding who you are and the way you approach things are really about the principles that you hold on to. So one of the first things that I ask people right away is, what are your core principles? And if they say, well, I'm a football player or I'm a big brother, well, those are things, those are titles, right? Those are not core principles. And so I give them an example that my core principles are 4 F's. Those 4 F's, the number 1 F is faith. So I'm guided by something much higher than me, right? And then you have your other F, family. So family is core because those are the people who surround you. Finance, I am definitely about making sure that I have long-term wealth. And then whether it's career or whatever the path is, the last thing is fun. So that may be football, right? That may be something that you do for enjoyment. If you know those core principles, those are the things that you can apply to any environment. How you get there, the tactics, the tactical execution strategy is going to be different. I think Tim referred to, hey, I had a bunch of different coaches, but I guarantee you his approach was basically the same because he had a core value of how he approached the game. And so that right there is how you adjust to different situations, whether it be in your corporate life, whether it be living out a dream of having your name on a building, having a candy bar named after you, having your logo on a football, whatever the case may be for your long-term journey. If your core principles are the same, whether it be faith, family, finances, making sure your money is in order, and also taking care of those fun things that really make you happy, those things are going to come together and be agile in any environment that you're in.
Coach Hayes, Reginald Martinez Jackson, Reggie Jackson, Mr. October, spoke some of his goals into existence. He talked about going to New York and having a candy bar. And guess what? There was a Reggie bar. I remember it well. So when you talk with these youngsters and you talking and counseling with people, I know I talk about putting goals on paper. Some of it is just knowing what you really want and putting it into play, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And, you have to, your plan has to be in some form or fashion written out or in your mind, ingrained in your mind that you can follow. As a youngster in our household, I was fortunate enough to have both my parents and both of them were HBCU graduates from Virginia Union, and just so that kind of lifestyle was instilled in me. I knew as before I went to kindergarten, I was going to college. that was what we did. So, having that foundation, and everyone's talked about those types of things, having that foundation in our household really propelled myself, my brothers, to do what we have done throughout our life. My brother Jonathan was an NFL player for a long, long time, and coached a long, long time, has had success. I've raised 3 Division I athletes out of my house, a female and 2 males. Jonathan's raising his kids, and they're all been successful athletes, along with his wife, who was a NCAA athlete. So, we've had a lot of success throughout my upbringing, be it in athletics, be it in music. I've had relatives that have won Grammy Awards and things like that. So, that's just kind of what we were expected to do. And but I've had a lot of kids throughout my career that didn't have that. And, you just have to find their hot buttons and kind of make sure that you're relating to them some sort of way. There have been times in my coaching career where maybe I wasn't as in touch with the younger generation, and have had to change up how I address and talk to them. But in the end, I'm still empathetic towards them. I still, I have no problem coming up and put my arm around somebody and saying, "Hey, man, you're not doing that the right way. Do this," and not jump. You can't jump everybody. You have to be able to when you need to be stern, but when you need to be soft, you need to be soft. And one of the first things that Coach Holtz told me, Tim, when I start coaching there at Notre Dame, he said, you got to encourage softly and encourage loudly and criticize softly. Now, I don't know that he necessarily did that all the time.
Right, I was about to say. Definitely didn't keep his word.
Yeah, that was one of the things he did say to me as a young coach, and he kind of complimented me that I did that, and try not to like scream and yell at guys anymore. When I was a young coach, I did sometimes, but Mike, I did, I did, but as I've gotten older, I've calmed down a little bit, and we're having grown children. You have to talk to them. You just have to communicate. You can't just say, "Hey, we're doing it this way. This is how I did it." Just because, or say, because I said so. You can't do that. That doesn't work anymore. And so you just have to be able to do it. And Michael, the Cal guys, man, you had to have answers for the Cal guys. You couldn't just tell them stuff.
Yeah, I've heard that about those Cal guys. I mean, everything's a debate, but we'll move on past that. That's just another subject for another time. Ms. Liberty, I'm gonna come back to you on this one because we're talking so much about the student athlete experience, and rightly so, because that's a lot of our audience. But what about the family that's a very sports-minded family, and that one comes along that says, "Hey, mom and dad, I know this is a sporty family, but I'm a non-sporty kid. But I still have goals. I still want to do things." How do those parents relate there? And can you put the same type of structure and process into other things besides trying to achieve what we want in sports?
Yeah, I have that in my household. I have I have an athlete that is growing up. He doesn't really have a choice. It's the family legacy that he will be a football player. My husband's been running him on the track since he was 1, so he will be a football player. But my daughter he took out on the track and he said, I think she better go to school. I think it's in her. I think it's in her brain. I think she's smart. Let's use her brain or so that. But the body, we can't get the body and the brain to work together well. So she did not become, the athlete that my husband dreamed of. But she's well on to her master's, about to apply for her PhD program. But some of those same things were instilled in her, right? And that is really about perseverance, making sure that you continue to stay the course no matter how you get knocked off. She thought she wanted to be a chemistry major. She ended up becoming a sociology major and went into higher education. Completely different track from being a pharmacist. I told her she'll have to marry well with that education. But I also believe that patience, and really, I think about the Michael Jordan story. It just keeps coming to my head, so I have to share that. We all know the story about him, trying out for the varsity team as a sophomore and being knocked down, only being a little scrawny, 5'10", I believe he was at the time. And the motivation that he had is something that we teach our children. And that motivation that he had was, he said he kept looking at envisioning his name not being on that list. And that kept him going in practices and how tired he was. The same thing in academics. The same thing if you're going into a special trade, you have to continue to push beyond your limits to achieve what you want. And I think those things are transferable whether you're an athlete or not. Those are just core principles.
Mr. Walls, at your house, I think you ran the gamut. What did you guys put into place in terms of process, non-athletic side, that helped lead to the right path?
When it came to our household, I think I kind of gave the kids a little bit of a free hand on what they wanted to do. As much as they think I drove them towards sports, I have an older daughter, younger son. Of course, the son, he that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be that ball player. But, my daughter, she was just too cute. It's just, hair products and curling irons and things of that nature. That was more than sweaty towels and uniforms. So she took that route, and she's also on her way to getting her master's at OU after getting her undergrad at Southern. So, that's the life she chose. And one thing that, just because a family may not be athletic, I think the core values of that family still shows through no matter what you go into. So regardless, as I was saying earlier, the kind of person I was, the kind of ball player I was. If I didn't put extra effort into studying, I didn't do well in with my grades. If I didn't put in the practice, I didn't do well in the game. So those things, I realize that those things are extremely important when it comes to success. There's the preparation for success before there is success. So that was something that I had to learn growing up, and that's what I passed on to my children.
Michael Davis, I'm seeing a comment here from James Yarbrough. Says your foundation is definitely the beginning of your process. There's nothing like seeing it done, and it allows you to think about what you wanted to do based on what you've been exposed to in your life. Neighborhood is community. That's striking a little bit of a chord with me. I have a feeling that you've seen that, and I'll turn that over for you, starting with you, and then, of course, Tim and Jay Hayes.
Definitely. That's my brother Squeak, man. Great question, Squeak. So there's a lot of ways you can go with that, but I think you need to be able to conceive, and Tim talked about this a lot, conceive it, believe it, to attain it. And a lot of that has to do with, again, what you've been exposed to. I was exposed when I was young to a different mindset, more of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. My mother was the first African-American woman to be vice mayor of Berkeley. So she always taught these core values, your foundational traits. Number one, not competing against others, competing against yourself every day. And I think that's a big core element that our kids get lost in, competing against something that's not real. And that deters them in their process. Oh man, I can't beat that. This guy did this on social media. Well, that's not true. They probably built up some type of photo or made themselves look great, because that's what social media is about. So end of the day, you have to be very comfortable and confident in who you are. You have to be able to see these things and believe in it to attain it. And so that goes into visualizing yourself being great. What is greatness to you versus just being good? And I think we all kind of touched on the differences between being great and good. And I think a lot of it has to be exposed. I have to be exposed to see different things, to be able to see it. So I have to have the exposure to see things, to be able to attain it, to put it into my spirit, to go after it. So if I don't have the exposure to it, it's hard for me to attain it. So I think that speaks to what my brother was talking about. But I think those are some of the foundational elements that I've saw in my neighborhood. A lot of guys that did not have exposure to certain things, lived down the street, but I saw things differently from my mindset. So I chose to walk up to the Cal campus where other guys never went to the Cal campus. And it was just down the street. But I was exposed to it at a young age. So then I was able to see it, attain it, and go after it, right? And stay the course from that perspective.
If we say neighborhood is community, Mr. Tim Brown, doesn't your neighborhood change in different aspects of your life? Your neighborhood where you grew up, your neighborhood where you went to school, your neighborhood in your professional life, etc.
Sure. It's conceive it, believe it, achieve it, Mike. Okay. Conceive it, believe it. Absolutely, man. Thankfully for me, the foundation I had coming up was my dad, grew up in Louisiana, literally picking cotton, dropped out of school in 3rd and 4th grade. My mom dropped out. Thankfully, she was able to go back and get her high school degree. So I was 5 of 6, but my youngest sister is 17 years younger than me. So all I saw was Dad saying, I don't care what y'all do in sports, but you better make sure you bring B's home, no C's, no D's, and you go into college. And so that's why when I got ready to choose a college, I didn't choose a football. I didn't choose it just for football. Notre Dame was a horrible football team when I first got there. So it wasn't because of that, but it was because of that education that I thought I could get, that I did get. And when I walked out the house, my mom and dad said, boy, there's no future in football for you. You go up there and get that education and come on back home. And, so you're exactly right. So now once you get to Notre Dame, now the community changes, right? And I never forget, and I tell this story all the time, the first big snow my freshman year, I'm calling everybody, hey, man, big snow. Where I'm from, big snow means no school. Everybody's like, hey, Tim, that's a good idea, man. I'll meet you at the huddle after I go to class. Hey, I'll meet you. I called my boy from California. I was like, oh, I know he's not going to class. And that brother was like, oh, no, Tim, I'll catch you. I'll catch you after class. So I was going to be the only one sitting in the room. So what did I do? I got my butt up and went to school because my community, that's what my community was doing. If my community was different, I probably would have done something different. But because I was around people who were pushing themselves and wanted to get not just the best out of life, best out of the school, but the best out of life also. One of my guys who was with me at Notre Dame is the president of the NBA. One of the guys runs a big electricity company in Louisiana. So these are guys who were trying to do extraordinary things, man. And because that was part of my community, I got that same vibe.
All right, guys, we're getting near the top of the hour. So here's what I need from you. About 20 to 30 seconds each. Give me something for everyone to take with them. Mr. J. Hayes, go.
Hey, who you surround yourself with will define who you become, and make sure you surround yourself with people like this that you're seeing in front of you right now. That will take you a long way. Don't hang with the bad guys.
Mr. Everson Walls.
I learned one thing, and that is you never see an opportunity with your head hanging down.
Outstanding. Mr. Tim Brown.
Can I just say ditto? Can I just say that?
I think
that's what it's all about. You have to see your opportunity, and you can't be hanging around knuckleheads, man. because you will become one of those knuckleheads.
Yeah, and you can't block anyone or tackle anyone with your eyes down too. So that's exactly true. Mr. Michael Davis.
You can never lose if you don't give up. So keep going, don't stop, and you won't lose. You're gonna continue to learn, like Coach Hayes says. You never go out of a situation where you don't lose and understand different things in regards to who you are and all the great things, but you just gotta continue to go forward and be true to yourself. So,
Ms. Rashida Liberty, can't thank you enough for this tonight. Can't wait to hear these final words coming from you.
Two things, just to summarize. I think what I heard is, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. That's just it. That's just as plain as it can be. And it's not the person who's the most athletic. It's not the person sometimes who's the most connected. It's the person who is the most disciplined that is successful.
Amen.
Discipline is about consistency, listening, and making sure that you stick to the process and trust that process. It's discipline. Because we all know players that probably shouldn't have made it, but they made it because they were disciplined.
Well, I'm looking forward to you getting some of those disciplined clients now that you're going to be an agent. We wish you all the luck and continued success. Thank you for showing us the way, because the battles you're fighting, I'd love to have an opportunity sometime for you to tell us about the battles you fought to get to where you are, because I know they've been some pitched ones, and you've shown us perseverance, you've shown us discipline, you've shown us dedication, and thank you so much for headlining this tonight. I thank my coaches and my brethren right here. They're on all the time, so they already know how much I love them. But thank you, Ms. Liberty, for being here and doing this for all of us. And I thank everyone for joining us tonight for this webinar. We certainly hope that you've got something to take away and put into process yourself. And thank you for contributing to this process. Good night, everyone.